Saucy evening, everyone. I'm LT Hewitt, sporting the shortest hair you'll ever see me with, owing to my barber getting distracted watching football and accidentally cutting way too much off. So I probably won't be going back there. I've just been to see Pillion, and this time I actually mean just been to see it. Literally ended like half an hour ago. Which, if you don't know, is quite an interesting film. Described by its writer-director as a dom-com, which I definitely think is probably an accurate description of it. It's a story about Colin, a young, slightly shy, openly gay man played by Harry Melling, who was Dudley Dursley in Harry Potter and then quit acting for many years, lost a lot of weight and came back as a completely different person. So you've probably seen him in The Ballad of Buster Scruggs by the Coen brothers, or in The Queen's Gambit, although you probably wouldn't realise it was the same person who'd been in Harry Potter all these years earlier, which is good for him. It's nice to have a completely different career. You have some people like that, you know, Joseph Gordon-Levitt did that, where he had a career as a child, quit acting, went to university, came back as not as an adult actor, an actor in films aimed at adults, and had a completely new breath of life. So he's very good in it, and he plays a young man who discovers he's into, well, I said BDSM. It is BDSM, but it's specifically him being a submissive partner to his dom, who is played by Alexander Skarsgård, and he's called Ray. Obviously Alexander Skarsgård, the Norseman, True Blood. Is that show about sexy vampires? Yeah, and they're both very good in it. It's a very well performed story, but for a lot of it, I think maybe the word story is quite a loose description of what happened. It's more scene setting. It's more telling this relationship rather than actually plot driven. There's a subplot about Colin's mother dying from cancer, and you see this all the way along. She's probably the strongest. I don't know necessarily the strongest performance, but I mean it's a very strong performance, probably the strongest. But it's a very profound performance, and she's a very real, down to earth person. Ray can at times I don't know what to say about Ray, because we kind of don't really know anything about him. He's just this sort of mystery. All he cares about is dominating, and he's not even forceful domination. It's often quite passive. It's just sort of little things like just ignoring Colin completely. The two meet in a pub, don't really speak, eventually meet up again and get involved in some naughtiness next to a lorry down some back alley. Yeah, it's the important thing about this film, which distinguishes it from, I know the BDSM community had a lot of complaints about things like 50 Shades of Grey, where they didn't really clarify consent. They weren't positive or accurate depictions of those types of relationships. And this film has been received quite differently, more positively, I'd say. Although I've heard some debate about whether or not it's an abusive relationship. And I say, having watched it, I'd say for probably the first hour and a half of the film, I was thinking maybe it was more ambiguous, but I think having watched the full thing, it's very clear that the writer-director, Harry Leighton, knows what he's doing and knows what he wants to say with this film. I don't think it's ambiguous on the fact that this is an unhealthy relationship. The word abusive can be difficult to apply in this circumstance. I'd say it's probably accurate, but there's nothing. He's never, Ray's never threatening or violent towards Colin, except when it's consensual as part of this power play, this dominance. And even then, there's not actually much violence. He never punches or slaps him around. It's just this kinkiness of sort of being told what to do, being told you have to sleep on the floor, you have to make my food, you're not allowed to sit on the sofa with me. Little things like that, which I know is some people's thing. I will say, reviewing this, I'm not part of the BDSM community. I have absolutely no desire to be part of it. So everything I know everything I'm saying about this film is very much as an outside observer. So I think I'd maybe be quite interested to hear what members of that community have to say about it. I did think for a lot of it, those people will probably be quite hacked off at how these characters are portrayed, because it doesn't really seem to be. Yeah, yes, there is informed consent very early on, but it's very vague. It's very much like, you know, Ray says to Colin, "What do you want me to do with you?" And Colin says, "Whatever you like." And that's about as far as we go in terms of consent, which is informed consent, which is the important thing. It's not controlling. It's not like abusive. It's not like Ray going, "I'm going to do this," and not check if you're on board with it. Colin's very much on board with it. But the thing is, there's never a discussion about when it ends, when it stops. And they never really discuss like safe words or anything like that. They never discuss days off. They never discuss the nature of their relationship, whether they're open or closed. A lot of these things go unsaid. And as a result, there are actions we see from Ray, but we start to think, actually, this isn't, first of all, it's not healthy at all. But it's clear there's things Colin is unhappy about, and Ray just ignores them. And I think particularly there's a moment which was quite uncomfortable, and I think is meant to be uncomfortable, but I think the point where it's very explicitly clear that this is a form of either abuse or neglect, depending on how you want to define it, where Colin asks to redefine the parameters of their relationship. He says specifically, "I'd like a day off a week. You know, I don't always want it to be like this." Because from a lot of people who are into BDSM, for some people, as far as I understand, this is a sexual thing. This is what we get up to in the bedroom, and then when that's over, we live our lives as any other couple. You know, we're into that kinky stuff in the bedroom in a sexual context, but the rest of our lives are just normal, healthy, equal relationships. Whereas there's some people, as depicted in this film, where it's part of the community, it's part of all aspects of their life, is that they have this sub-dom relationship. But I think the thing that saved this film from being maybe a negative portrayal of BDSM, or maybe a cliched depiction of it, is that it's made very clear that what Ray and Colin have is different to what other members of the community have, where they do kiss, they do express their feelings, they do talk to each other, and they do listen to each other. And it's very much made clear, you know, this is part of the fun, this is part of the dynamic, but it's not the entirety of our relationship. Was Ray is very emotionally stunted and cut off, and really quite cruel to Colin, I'd say, in the way he neglects him. He basically, I think early on, because it's kind of treated like basically what Ray wants is a 1950s housewife. He wants someone to do all his cooking, do all his chores, and not answer back, not have opinions of their own, not ask any questions. And early on, it almost feels like it's trying to depict this as an alternative lifestyle rather than a very negative, unhealthy, unequal relationship. And I think there were parts early on where it was a bit, I'm a little bit prudish when it comes to some things anyway, so I didn't think this would necessarily be my favourite film of all time. But I think early on it felt like we were just sort of showing it as like, oh, here's a relationship type, rather than, no, this is unhealthy, this is something this person needs to get out of. There's all sorts of ways people can be into BDSM and be in healthy relationships. But I think what we see from Ray and Colin definitely isn't that. And I think towards, like, I think when we hear the mother's opinion on it, when we hear Colin's mum finally meeting Ray and actually getting to know him, it's sweet, it's funny, but also I think most people watching this, hopefully most people watching this, think she's in the right, she's the voice of reason here, who's going, actually, you need to treat my son with more respect. Because it's one thing for this to be a kink they have, a dynamic they have, but for that to be in the entirety of their life, that Colin feels afraid to ask questions, it changes things a lot. And I think when Colin asks to have a day off a week, and which is, that's a little bit of a spoiler, but it's towards the end of the film, and Ray denies that, it becomes very clear, actually now this is unhealthy, because now the consent has gone, because it's almost like Colin seems to think he needs permission from Ray to not have this, whereas really, as soon as someone withdraws their consent, that should be the end of it. And there are a lot of times where you are kind of watching Colin going, please leave, please get out of this. And a lot of the film, and this is acknowledged within the film, a lot of the film depends upon the fact that you've got someone who looks like Alexander Skarsgård playing that character. If it was anyone who wasn't conventionally unbelievably attractive, there is no way in hell this film would be the same film. I think it would be very much, you go into it going, he's scum, get away from him. And I think it's almost a trick of the conventional attractiveness, which they acknowledge in the film, of the fact that because he's so handsome, it's almost like Colin feels lucky to have found someone like him. And I think someone actually says that to him. One of his colleagues says to him, like, oh, how'd you get with someone like him? You know, what's he doing with you? And Colin basically says, well, I just do what he wants. I just do his bidding, and that's how you get someone like that. And I think towards the end, again, I don't want to spoil anything, but it becomes clear that what this film is about, so to speak, the thing that it's about is about asserting your own boundaries, finding what you're into and finding what you're not into, and actually having that courage and confidence and self-respect to have clearly defined boundaries, which is, I think, what in the end dragged it up for me from a 4 out of 10 until I'm going to end up, let's say, a 6 out of 10. I can completely see people watching it and loving it more than I do, and I wouldn't judge anyone who said this was their favourite film of the year. I think there's some interesting stuff happening, but I think for me, I know, not that I want to rush what a film is about, but I think for me, it's not that it took a long time to get to the point, it's the fact that for most of the film I didn't think there was a point. And it's almost like that point towards the end becomes clear, and it doesn't feel tagged on, it feels that point is integral to the story, integral, like I say, there is a very loose idea of a story. The point is there, the themes are discussed and explored all the way through, but it could have ended in a very different way. It could very much have ended with Ray and Colin being together and being happy, and us thinking that what the filmmakers want us to think is that this is their idea of a healthy relationship and this is all fine. And I think for me, that's what separates it. It's not like all the way through we're being told, get out of this. It's more like there's touches here and there of get out of this, and we kind of go, what are the filmmakers' views on it? But I think it's very clear. I don't think Harry Lighton's being that ambiguous. So maybe 6 out of 10 seems a little harsh. I just think it's not a film I would ever watch again. And it's not a film that had loads to say. It was a perfectly fine exploration of this area, but it's one of those films where if you'd shown me that film, let's say that film would be made as like a half-hour film, like a short film, and then been expanded to this, I don't think anyone would be praising the expansion as much. I think people would still be going, the short film's it's saying all the stuff it needs to. I don't really feel like there's anything added by, I mean, it's not a long film, it's an hour 40, but it could have been done as half an hour. I think maybe the fact that I've been acting and directing in so many short films and having to cut down films, cut to be festival friendly or be accessible to the public, has maybe given me a mindset that if something can be a short film, why isn't it a short film? I've had scripts where I've written feature films, still get to be made, still get to get funding, but I've written feature films that started out as short films where I just simply couldn't contain what I had to say, what I needed to say, explore the concept fully within that half an hour, 40 minutes, whatever. It had to be a feature. And I think this is one where, because it could have been a short film and been possibly even more impactful, that's maybe what drags it down a little bit to me. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. If you loved it, if you thought it was your film of the year, I completely respect that. I know Mark Kermode made it his film of the week, and Simon Mayo felt very much the opposite. And they did have that discussion. If you listen to their podcast, it's quite an interesting discussion. But Simon Mayo was very much like, this is an abusive relationship, and I can't really get on board with the film because of that. And I do think there were times where I was worried, like, did it romanticize abuse a bit? A little bit, but I think the ultimately, it condemned it just enough for me. Anyway, yeah, let me know your thoughts. Please like and subscribe, and I look forward to the next thing I review when my hair's possibly slightly longer and hopefully got my own short film out soon enough. Anyway, have a good night.